What is going on, everybody? We have made it to one of my favorite times of the year, draft grades season, baby. I'm especially excited for all of those incoming comments telling me just how useless draft grades are. Look, I know one thing. I didn't spend the last 4 months grinding college tape to not tell you guys how I think every team found value in this weekend's NFL draft, and how I see all of these players fitting in with their new teams. Today, I'm going to be giving you my thoughts on every single pick from the AFC South, including any undrafted free agent steals that stood out to me as well. Before we do get started though, guys, if you could do me a huge favor, take just a second to hit that like button down below. I know it sounds silly, but especially in a video like this, it does such a good job telling YouTube to suggest this video out to other NFL sickos just like you guys, so I really appreciate if you could take just a second to hit that down below. And of course, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss all 8 of my divisional draft grades videos. But let's go ahead and get started with the Tennessee Titans. Alphabetically, you guys were supposed to go last, but I feel like you guys got kind of jobbed out of your moment when you take Cam Ward number 1 and then immediately the Jags trade up for Travis Hunter and nobody talks about the Tennessee Titans. So we're going to start with you guys and going to give Cam Ward some love here with that number 1 pick. This is an A-graded pick. The Titans get the one real first-round quarterback in this draft, in my opinion. There's been so much talk about Cam Ward going here for so long now, so this wasn't a surprise, obviously, but I'm really excited for the Titans to see him come in here and see how this is going to work out, because he is a bit of a riskier prospect. Some of the YOLO balls into double coverage, some of the pass-ups on tape, I think the accuracy can be hit or miss, but again, not trying to highlight the weaknesses here. This guy has tremendous upside in the league. I think he can be not just a franchise quarterback, but one of those real tier 1 or tier 2 difference-making quarterbacks if things go right, because he has that one trait that I argue is a non-negotiable trait for all of the elite quarterbacks in the NFL, and that is elite pocket presence from Cam Ward, the ability to sense pressure, to navigate the pocket naturally while keeping his eyes downfield, to drift against the rush, to buy a little bit of extra time when he needs to get out of the pocket, of course, when it's appropriate, but to sit inside a clean pocket when he isn't pressured. How many quarterbacks in the NFL or down the board in this draft will get a 3-man rush and they'll just bail out of a clean pocket, or even a clean pocket against a normal 4-man rush? You gotta love that about Cam Ward. His general just feel for the game, the spatial awareness, call it it factor if you will, is fantastic, on top of all of the great things he does with his arm. I think he does show advanced NFL level processing, even if sometimes he can force some balls. He's very Jordan Love in my opinion there, where you might get some ugly interceptions that people on Twitter freak out about, but what doesn't get talked about are the 3-4 times within a game where he understands the nuances of the coverage he's getting and exactly where to put the ball with anticipation. Never really made sense to me that Shedeur was the guy that got credit in this class for throwing with anticipation, when I saw Cam Ward do it way more consistently. And another reason I love Cam Ward, just seems like a great personality, and he has a proven track record of work ethic and knowing how to develop. Some guys are hard workers, but they don't necessarily know how to watch tape, or aren't maybe putting work towards the right things to get better as a player. Cam Ward has proven that throughout his time, going back to Incarnate Ward and Washington State, heading into the year as a projected 3rd, 4th round draft pick, to do what he did this year. That alone is an incredible aspect to Cam Ward worth betting on. So an awesome pick for the Tennessee Titans. And as we get to talk about the rest of this draft, plus what they did in free agency, man, this is now a number 1 quarterback coming into a situation that it's not going to be a nightmare, if nothing else. But I think they did an excellent job, and the Tennessee Titans could actually be like sneaky good with how good I think this draft class was. Spoiler alert, this is going to be certainly a candidate for the best draft class out of all 32 teams in my opinion. And that's kind of beyond the fact that they did get the QB at number 1, although that of course helps. But this begins in the 2nd round, where they moved down. They moved down from the 35th pick and go down to the 52nd pick and take Oluwafemi Oladejo. Now, this normally would be a B-graded pick for me. I think this is kind of the very top of the range that I would be thinking about Oladejo. I was sitting next to everybody down there at the Senior Bowl, and Olu was making some noise, not just with his play at the Senior Bowl, but literally he was the most active and loud just player in between drills, interacting with the coaches and stuff. And clearly NFL coaches ate that up on him for a guy that is really athletic, has all of the physical traits to absolutely reward the Titans for this pick. And only played 1 year as an edge rusher, converted from off-ball linebacker to UCLA. And, he didn't go full Abdul Carter with that, but he did break out a cross chop and showed some really good stuff. He naturally can take on blocks and defend the run with that former linebacker experience. So it's definitely a bit of a projection in terms of him becoming a starter in the league. So it just was a tick early. But to move down, recoup a third-round pick, which they didn't have because of the L'Jarius Sneed trade to the Chiefs, which aged really poorly for this team. Hopefully he can stay healthy and be out there for them this year. But to come back and get back into the third round where you didn't have a pick and then get a guy that they loved that was much more of a value late second than had they taken him right out the gate with that 35th pick. So if they really wanted this guy, and I do agree they had to take him inside the top 75 picks, I love trading down and getting that extra pick. So a B grade becomes an A, which is a part of my grading criteria. If you navigate the draft well and get good value, you're going to get the benefit of that for the move as a whole, even if this individual pick would be more of a B player for me. But then Kevin Winston Jr. out of Penn State in the middle of the third round. This is one of my favorite overall picks in the entire draft. Not only did I have a top 50 grade on Kevin Winston, and this is definitely a steal based on my evaluations here in the middle of the third round, that's all sensational. But beyond that, I love this scheme fit for the Titans. With Denard Wilson coming over from that Ravens defense, being their defensive coordinator here in Tennessee, this is very much that Mike Macdonald style system, which has shown all across the league that they love three safety packages. And that started with how they use someone like Kyle Hamilton, that big safety down as a nickelback near the line of scrimmage, defending players in the slot, acting as a quasi linebacker at times, showing off that coverage ability and hook zones and curl flats and all that stuff. And, we saw Seattle take Nicky Manwari in Mike Macdonald's system there to replicate that. We've seen Derwin James do this and have, kind of get back closer to his prime with how they use him with the Chargers and all of their three safety packages. Same thought process here with the Titans, getting a 6'1", 15-pound freak athlete in Kevin Winston Jr., who I didn't shy away from putting a high-end pro comp of Derwin James on top of here. And the reason he falls here is because he's coming off of that partially torn ACL, and I don't think it's too much of a concern that he's going to be healthy and available. I don't believe he has some serious record of injuries from before that, but the reason he falls is because he only played 2 games in 2024 and was just a 1-year starter in 2023. But in that 1 year, he definitely, if he just repeated what he did in 2023, that's a first-round player and quite possibly the number 1 safety in this draft. He didn't miss a single tackle in 2023, flashed some coverage ability, the speed he has. I mean, the main reason I say there shouldn't be concerns that he can be out there and ready to play is it was a partially torn ACL, and he actually 6 months recovered from the injury, ran a 40-yard dash at his pro day, and he ran a 4.51. I think with full time to work on the technique of the 40 and to get fully healthy, he easily has 4.4 something speed. So this is a highlight of day 2 of the draft. The Titans getting that extra pick and then getting someone that could be a first-round value at this stage has tremendous upside. And bravo by Borgonzi, the new GM for the Tennessee Titans, who just crushed the first round of this draft. But it keeps getting better. What they did on day 3 was one of my favorite day 3s that any team had, if not my favorite. They kicked things off drafting Shamari DK out of Florida. I think a name that surprised a lot of people, but as we know, if you are a legitimate vertical threat that can take the top off a defense, that is the ultimate cheat code for an offense. And Shamari DK showed at Florida he can absolutely do that with his 4.3 speed, with his burst, being a physical player that can work through contact and continue to accelerate through physical coverage, he was a dynamic playmaker for Florida that really broke out. Yes, in his 5th year, you don't love to see late year breakouts like that, but let's not act like he was coming from some dynamic passing game in his 4 years at Wisconsin. Doesn't have incredible ball skills, but he does show off the 38.5-inch vertical jump, the 128-inch broad jump when he elevates and attacks the football. He really can be a difference-making deep threat in the NFL, and we saw this run on deep threats here in the 4th round. Right after the Titans took DK, they kicked off a run where we saw Dante Thornton come off the board, who I had ranked just behind DK as a 3rd to a 4th round grade in this draft. Jalen Lane goes in the 4th round. We saw the Jets go with Arian Smith as well. So this wasn't some reach. If they wanted that vertical threat in that offense, it's just going to take all of the pressure off of the offensive line in the run game, the running backs in the run game, Cam Ward, forcing a defense to make sure your safeties can't creep down and get that extra guy in the box is, again, the ultimate cheat code for an offense, and I love that pick. I think he's starting out the gate. Reminds me a lot of Alec Pierce, by the way, in his overall talent and projection to the next level, who has actually carved out a very nice role as that vertical presence for the Colts. Titans fans, I'm sure, are familiar with Alec Pierce inside this division. But then another awesome pick. They take Gunnar Helm in the 4th round. And look, I don't want to oversell Gunnar Helm as like a likely superstar in the NFL or anything, but I had a 3rd round grade on him. I thought he was a better complete player than some of the tight ends that went in the 2nd round of this draft. Just think like Cole Kmet, just a really steady, balanced wide tight end. He's a good blocker, even though he's not the biggest guy. He's got awesome hands. He's super smart in scramble drill. Love pairing that with Cam Ward. When he starts running around and making his magic, Gunnar Helm had great awareness to find those soft spots in the defense. Think about a little glimpse of what Travis Kelce and Mahomes are able to create together, just kind of seeing the game together in the same way. I think we might get some of that scramble drill magic there, being that best friend there for Cam Ward. I just love everything about that. I think it opens up Chigakonkwo as well, where he's not a great inline tight end, but he can play some big slot, 12 personnel stuff. But it's going to help your run game getting a little bit more size and run blocking from a guy like Gunnar Helm. Love this pick. I think he has a very good chance to be their day 1 starter as a wide tight end for them, or at least, splitting reps with the guys in that room day 1, getting playing time. And then, man, another colossal steal here. Alec Iomanor out of Stanford in the 4th round. I did get word that he did fall for a medical situation that popped up kind of right before the draft. And by day 3, the Titans were comfortable enough rolling the dice on him in the 4th round. So obviously, if there's an injury-related thing and he's not available, that's going to be a bummer. But at this stage, essentially a 5th round pick on someone that his tape was top 50 tape for me, a big-bodied wide receiver that can run routes. He's tough at the catch point. Needs to clean up the focus drops, but he's super young, plenty of time to hit the jugs machine. He blocks his ass off. He's a pain to tackle after the catch. Worst case scenario, he's going to be what like Michael Wilson has been for the Cardinals as like a nice perimeter starter for you, but he's got a lot more juice than someone like Michael Wilson. Doesn't necessarily show that in his routes, but it is in there because you do see him after the catch. He pulls away. He's one of these guys, maybe like a Debo or a Michael Pittman. Not that I'm comparing him to be as good as those guys, but those are players in the league that are much faster with the ball in their hands than they are within their routes. He has a little bit of that to him. So this was just tremendous value to get him this late. One of my favorite day 3 picks, to say the least. Then I don't hate what they did the rest of their draft. They take Jackson Slater out of Sacramento State. I didn't have access to Sacramento State, so I wasn't able to write him up, but definitely was on my radar as, kind of your classic small school, really athletic developmental lineman. I love the landing spot, getting to work with Bill Callahan, the offensive line coach, obviously Brian's dad, one of the best O-line coaches in the entire NFL. So, if he eventually carves out a starting role behind Kevin Zeitler, who they bring in, who's like 34, 35 years old, it's a really nice landing spot. I don't know that it's some glorified steal or anything like that, but absolutely someone to keep an eye on that could very well develop into a starter here. And then they get Marcus Harris, the cornerback out of California. The week of the draft, I made a conscious decision to watch other guys over him. He was on my radar. Figured he might get drafted because he was able to get that 40 time down, I think into the 4.3s, 4.38, right, at his pro day after running a 4.45 at the combine. But I had already watched that California secondary twice. First with Noah Williams, then with Craig Woodson, and I completely gaffed in those two watches that they had another guy that might get drafted there. So good defensive back group there. I didn't end up putting a final grade on him, but definitely a solid pick. Has the speed. He is an older prospect, six-year player, but reasonable pick if nothing else there in the 6th round. And then they go Khalil Mullings out of Michigan, who my pro comp on him, Titans fans very familiar, Hassan Haskins, just kind of a goal line presence for them. I think he makes sense. I don't think this is some great value or that he's going to be a starter or anything like that, but with Tony Pollard, with Tyjae Spears there, they don't really have a power back that can make you feel better about some of those short yardage situations, or if you are actually playing with a lead, which Titans fans would be very happy to say that, if that's the case next year, someone that can maybe grind out some tough carries and wear on a defense later in the game, a role playing back. I definitely thought he was draftable, so a solid pick and makes sense for what they kind of needed to fill out that group. So I think a good pick for what they kind of needed to fill out that room just makes a ton of sense. And then just as if things couldn't get any better, man, you just steal Xavier Restrepo as an undrafted free agent. Yes, he ran a 4.840 at his pro day. This has a chance to be Jarvis Landry all over again, who likewise ran like a 4.8 and spent, 5 years as the best slot wide receiver in the NFL, or one of the best. I think this has a very good chance of being that. Look, Xavier Restrepo's 40 is not great, and I lowered my grade on him down to a 3rd round grade when that happened. But the GPS tracking still shows a guy that's consistently hitting 17, 18 miles per hour in his intermediate routes. This guy can still get open over the middle of the field. He's got a ton of nuance. And by the way, you frickin' reunite him with Cam Ward. This is remarkable. Was one of the first free agents that was announced as the draft ended, and with the Titans not having any more picks after that Khalil Mullings pick, they probably started to put this together like into the 7th round. Like, are we really about to get Xavier Restrepo undrafted? Are you kidding me? So to me, the NFL overthought this. I'm very excited to see what he can do here. Obviously, low risk, high reward. How can you fault that? The Tennessee Titans get an A+ grade for me. There is really not a thing I would criticize here. If I were to get extremely nitpicky, it would be that I had a couple guys ranked higher than Oladipo in David Walker and Princely Umanmielen, but it's not like it was some reach either with a 2nd or 3rd round grade there on him. Definitely an early candidate for my favorite draft, the highest graded draft, a true A+ grade. I am on board, Titans fans. I'm really excited for this team. We got a question in the live stream, like, who do you think might be this year's surprise playoff team? The Texans from 23, the Commanders from 24. This would be your candidate for that. The rookie quarterback coming in and a roster that, frankly, at this point is ready to go now. Really excited to watch some Titans football. Maybe can even get down to Nashville this year for a game. But shout out Tennessee. Excited to kickstart this video with that one. But let's go north to Indianapolis and talk about the Indianapolis Colts, where Tyler Warren ends up falling to you with the 14th pick. This is the Thanos meme. It all comes back to me. I am inevitable. We've been mocking Tyler Warren here, it feels like, since the 14th pick. It feels like Cam Ward #1 and Tyler Warren to the Colts were like the 2 most common mock draft picks to a degree. So I will say, with all of the talk about how many teams might have liked him inside the top 10, it is a great value and great feeling to know that their guy just drops to them at 14. We know Chris Ballard's not a guy that loves to be too aggressive to move up. So to stay put and get him, And, I'm not going to criticize the Bears for taking Loveland. I think Loveland makes sense for the Bears more than Warren would have made sense for the Bears. But to see another tight end that I think most people would have had ranked below Tyler Warren get drafted ahead of you there lets the board fall to you in this way. So just an A+ grade in that sense to get a top 10 player in this draft, in my opinion, at the 14th pick. Warren ended up the number 8 player on my final big board. But what a fit in this offense, too. I'm so excited to see this, man. The Colts are going to be up there for the most obnoxious offense to defend in the league. I don't know if Anthony Richardson's going to prove to be good or not at this point, but Jesus, man, you got to deal with Anthony Richardson in all of his freaky rushing ability. You got to deal with Jonathan Taylor out of the backfield, one of the toughest backs to tackle in the league. You've got a plethora of wide receivers with all sorts of different skill sets, many of which being physical, annoying players to deal with. Michael Pittman and the elusiveness of a Josh Downs in the slot. But what they've been missing was that core tight end, right? They've been trying to find this guy. For a minute, it looked like Jelani Woods had some potential there. He hasn't been able to stay healthy. But to get Tyler Warren here, who immediately becomes one of the hardest tight ends to tackle in all of football, and then on top of all of the players, you're pairing this with Shane Steichen, whose scheme is perfect with RPOs and read options and, the way to go play action boot and all this different stuff, the pop passes and, sucking the defense in and dropping the ball right over the linebackers' heads to Tyler Warren. I don't know that Warren is the most dynamic route runner. I think he does get open. He does run good routes, but there's room to develop in that sense. He's not the most incredible athlete to just pull away from someone on a crossing route, but within this scheme, they're going to be able to just manufacture easy touches for him. That's going to help Anthony Richardson. And frankly, if Richardson can't stay healthy or if he just can't develop, I think this offense could be run by Daniel Jones to a decent level. I really do. So a really exciting landing spot for Colts fans, an awesome way to kickstart their draft. But day 2 did get a little weird for them. They take JT Tuimoloau very early, in my opinion, relative to this edge class. They take him at the 13th pick in the second round. Nothing wrong with JT. I think he is going to be a very high floor, like 2B type of player, as an awesome run defending edge rusher, someone that's never going to be your alpha elite edge number 1 that they're hoping Laiatu Latu can develop into. And frankly, I don't know that he's always going to be a guy that you're happy with being out there on all 3 downs as a pass rusher. He can do some stuff. He's got some power. He's good with his hands. He wins late. He constantly is working towards the quarterback, and if the QB starts scrambling, he's a great cleanup artist and all that stuff, but not someone that wins one-on-ones very early, just doesn't really have the traits to do that. So I think ideally you're talking about him being Tyquan Lewis, who's on this team, Kwity Paye, who's on this team. I get why they like him, but if I'm a Colts fan and you're taking an edge this early in this draft class, much rather would have swung for some more upside with that group. I think the floor is just fine, especially a guy like Nick Scorton that goes just a few picks later. I frankly would have been more excited about the upside of Oladejo, who we talked about. Obviously he falls to the 4th round, but David Walker was a better, higher upside player in my opinion. We'll see how that ages going to Tampa in the 4th round there. It'll be fun to kind of look back on that statement. Even like a Landon Jackson, who the Bills were swinging for in the 3rd round. Again, Tuimoloau is going to be a nice player. There's make no mistake about that, but we are talking about a high 2nd round pick in a remarkably deep edge group. I just didn't love that pick. I'm just being honest about it. So, yeah, it might be a pick that you look back on in a couple years and say, that wasn't a C. He's a very effective run defender and a nice player for us. Well, you got to kind of go back in time and contextualize and look at some of the other options they might have had, and we'll have to see how those other guys pan out, of course. Then they take Justin Wally in the 3rd round. This one was just a little odd to me. It felt definitely early for Wally, a guy with kind of average tape, average testing, average production, average size. I thought he was a, solid prospect, draftable on day 3 of the draft. We'll see. I mean, they kind of went against the consensus last year with Matt Goncalves in the 3rd round, and they looked right for that. So if you want to trust Chris Ballard here, that's fine. I don't know how much benefit of the doubt Chris Ballard has earned over the last 3 or 4 years here, but the consensus board has been pretty damn good with like top 75, top 100 players for the most part. And going that far against it this high in the draft does come with its risks. Time will tell, but I think in all likelihood they could have done more with that asset there. But then you go to day 3, you get Jalen Travis out of Iowa State, really traitsy developmental tackle. He definitely stood out as one of the premium traits-based developmental tackles in this draft. The dude's 6'7.5", 340 pounds, 35-inch arms. He ran a 5.14 40. A lot of measurables there. The tape was very up and down at Iowa State, but if you're looking 2-3 years down the road, Braden Smith is going to turn 30 after this season. So, give it a couple seasons and let him develop. There are the traits there for him to turn into something special there. And shit, if he's good, better than you're expecting, maybe you could have some flexibility to slide Braden Smith back into guard or something like that. I don't know, but that would be a little bit of a surprise. But crazier things have happened for a guy with those measurables. So I do think it's a solid pick. It's about where he was supposed to go. I'm not going to praise it as some, great value or anything like that, but the process is very sound. Then they take DJ Giddens in the 5th round. I like this pick. I always thought Giddens was going to be more of a backup running back in the league, but a versatile backup. He's got solid size, pretty good speed, frankly, but, he's just kind of good across the board. I didn't see him as a great tackle breaker or super elusive, great power, anything like that. But as a backup to Jonathan Taylor, just to kind of give him a series, or if JT misses a game here or there, he definitely is in that mold of, straight line speed, can run through arm tackles, does a lot of stuff Jonathan Taylor does well, just not to the same degree. Reminds me a lot of Marlon Mack, frankly, going back for Colts fans there. So you kind of get an image of what you might be getting there. Then they take Riley Leonard in the 6th round. Look, I didn't have a draftable grade on Riley Leonard, but I will say, he was one of the better scrambling/rushing threat QBs available late in the draft. So you either keep him around as QB3, or you might be able to practice squad him, or have that emergency QB3 rule or whatever. If Richardson's going to get banged up again, and Daniel Jones is a guy that's had durability concerns, Riley Leonard, who played at Notre Dame, went on a national championship run, I don't think he's an idiot. He just doesn't have incredible high-end processing down the field. He's got that point guard ability to run this offense that we described with Tyler Warren earlier, and he's an effective rushing threat. So if he was going to go anywhere, this would be the offense I would want to put him in. So I see what they see in him, even if he doesn't have this developmental upside or anything. But for a team that's they're trying to win, you got a couple of injury-prone quarterbacks on the roster, this pick did make sense to me. Then you go Tim Smith out of Alabama with the next pick. I didn't get to Tim Smith, played at Alabama as a rotational D tackle for 5 years. Preferably I'd like to see you emerge as a starter at some point in your career, even if that is at Alabama. But I did think he would get drafted. I just didn't quite get around to his tape. So solid enough pick there. We'll see what they can get out of him. And then I do love the Hunter Waller pick late in the 7th round here. I had him as a 4th to a 5th round grade as a safety. I broke him down in my top 10 safeties video if you want to hear even more about him, Colts fans. But a very fun player, but someone that was going to have a hard time. There was only 4 or 5 teams in the league that were going to view him as kind of a draftable safety, because it's not that his coverage tape was bad. It's just he's very much that throwback box safety type, which is a bit of a dying breed in the modern NFL, where all these teams are in that kind of loosely the Fangio system with the split safeties that are starting deep and can do everything. That's not Hunter Waller. He has to be a true strong safety or a third safety in one of these McDonald's style systems. So there's only so many spots he could go. I love them taking him and just saying, hey, you want to be a linebacker? You want to do what you do well and cover the middle of the field and smash dudes towards the sideline, come in and compete with someone they had success with last year doing this with Jalen Carley's. I think they like Carley's, but I don't think he's proven yet that he can be a real linebacker. He played a lot of weak side linebacker stuff in base defenses and as a dime linebacker, but they do have opportunities opening up here for someone to actually emerge as a real linebacker. And for Waller, it shouldn't be that hard for him to put on 10 pounds. He's 6'2", he's got 30.5-inch arms, which is pretty good arm length for a safety. I think there's room to fill that out and get up to size. And if he really grinds at it and gets himself into the body of a linebacker, he has all of the instincts and physical tools to make it as a linebacker. So definitely a day 3 guy to keep an eye on there. Excited to see what his path looks like. So I ended up giving the Colts a B grade. I just think they could have gotten way more impact out of day 2 in this draft. If you put a gun to my head and said, how do these guys pan out? I would say JT Tuimoloau is a guy that gives you 450, 500 good run defense snaps throughout the course of a season as a nice 2B option for you. And Justin Wally's probably just a special teamer and a kind of versatile backup DB that can survive if anybody gets hurt, but never going to really emerge as a starter. Obviously, I hope I'm wrong with any of these picks that I criticize, but you gotta love the Tyler Warren pick. I think all their day 3 picks made sense. I just don't know that they stole crazy value or anything like that, other than the Hunter Waller pick, which I really liked. So B grades seem to make sense for me on this Colts draft. Next up, we have the Jacksonville Jaguars, who made the biggest of splashes. One of the just most kind of shocking draft moments that I can remember in a good way. I was so sure that Cleveland was going to stay put and take Travis Hunter, and for Jacksonville to kind of pry him away. And I liked the trade down for Cleveland too. I talked about this. I think this was ultimately a win-win situation, and for all of us too, not just the Jags and for Cleveland, but for all of us as football fans, to see Travis Hunter go to a team that needed both a corner and a wide receiver and is going to embrace the two-position nature of Travis Hunter in a way that I think Cleveland clearly was a little bit more hesitant on. Now, the risk here is tremendous. Not only are you talking about something we've never seen before, we have seen players play on both offense and defense, but not as a starting player at both wide receiver and corner. We can't let Travis Hunter take all of Patrick Ricard's glory as someone that played both D tackle and fullback for the Ravens. We have seen Marcus Jones step in as a slot corner and get some targets as a gadget wide receiver, but nothing quite like this, right? Where you're talking about 2 real roles for an offense, and there's risk to that, right? Not just risk in the sense of, can he realistically do this at the NFL level? I actually think he can. I don't push back on the idea that he can't do this and can't be the next, Shohei Ohtani in the NFL. I think he's shown us time and time again that his stamina is remarkable, and he's good enough at both positions to do this, and he's smart enough and hard enough working as a football player to understand both sides of the ball, right? The answer that he had in an interview where they were like, how are you going to do this? And he was like, well, we try to sleep about 8 hours a night if you're lucky, and that leaves us 16 hours left in the day, and those are for football. It's like, dude, yes, he was amidst all of the, flash and Deion Sanders and Shador and the, diamond chains and all this stuff. He deep down is just a freaking baller, man, and a really high IQ player that shows in both sides of the ball. So I do believe he can do it, but there's risk attached to it. Honestly, the bigger risk attached to Travis Hunter is that, especially once you start paying him, and he is going to demand an ass load of money, probably QB money as a playing 2 valuable positions if he's good at this. If there's a season where he does get hurt, the risk there is, and he is a more slender player, by the way, if he does get hurt, you are losing 2 star players. That's honestly the biggest risk attached to Travis Hunter. But you can kind of make an inverted argument for why it's worth trading what the Jags did to come up and get him, which is obviously what makes this so risky. They're giving up effectively 3 first-round picks, potentially even more, right? I think if you look at the pick value chart, pick 5 and pick 36 are probably worth more than 2 picks that are the 20th pick in the draft, something like that. And then you give up your first round pick next year. But the way you can kind of justify that is, well, we're trading for 2 players, right? We're getting a corner and a wide receiver, both needs for the Jags. And realistically, I would think the Jags are like a lot of us out there that had him as a top 5 player as a wide receiver and a top 5 player as a corner. So you can justify giving up all those picks if he's going to be 2 players for you, right? And I do love that kind of justification for this move. Ultimately, I'm super excited for this. I love how he fits in for the Jags. If he's going to be good at both these positions, they need an outside corner and they needed a wide receiver. I think this is super exciting. It's going to be polarizing to see how this works out. There's obvious risk attached, right? He's got to, number one, do something no one's ever done before and be a star player on both sides of the ball. Huge risk attached to that. And then number two, the Jags got to win, man. Even if Travis Hunter's great, I think if the Jags as a team aren't good again and they're picking 6th again next year, like they've been picking in the top 10 seemingly every year for like the last 10 years, other than that Saxonville year. But like if you're giving the 7th pick to the Browns next year, I don't think the value checks out for this move. But if you're good and that turns into the 20th pick or whatever, this is going to potentially look like a genius move. So very fun move. I don't hate it. I love it, frankly. It's an A-graded move for me. It's just incredibly aggressive, and I cannot wait to see how this one plays out. But I'm going to take the optimistic, excited about this move outlook on this one, and I've got a good feeling about it. Doesn't mean it's guaranteed to work and all that, but I did love it, and good for the Jags to make it happen. But then, of course, they don't pick until the 3rd round, having given up their 2nd round pick. And they go with Caleb Ransaw, a developmental DB, in my opinion, who played a little corner, played a little safety at Tulane. I did watch him. I just wasn't moved. Clearly a good athlete, right? Like, he tests incredibly well. The dude ran a 4.33, 40-inch vertical jump. You see the speed on tape. But it's not like you loaded up Tulane tape and saw an impactful defensive player, in my opinion. I didn't think he had much anticipation. I think the zone feel needs to develop. Wasn't impressed by what he did as a run defender. You're trusting your coaches, right? So I get it. You know, he tested super well, and that's what allows us to be a D-graded pick and not an F-graded pick, in my opinion, because for me, I see Xavier Watts go 8 picks later, and I just can't get behind gambling on, an athlete that I had as a 5th round grade over someone that was a top 50 player in this draft that was remarkably productive at Notre Dame. That, okay, just because he ran a 4.59, he's not going to be good. I mean, come on. Xavier McKinney, Tyler Nubin last year. There's plenty of safeties that ran in the low, 4.5s that are studs in the NFL. So I can't endorse that pick for the Jags. I hope they can develop him and he turns into something. I do imagine he's going to be more of a safety for them, right? Because you already have now 2 slot corners, not just Jordan Lewis. But in taking Travis Hunter, you're kind of roadblocking this idea that Jerrion Jones is going to step out and be an outside corner for you at least full time. So I would imagine they look at their safety room where it's Eric Murray and Darnell Savage and Andrew Wingard and say, yeah, you're going to be a safety for us. Even if I think he was announced as a corner, but he can do a little bit of both. I don't like that pick really at all. Kind of reminded me of some of those old Trent Baalke picks a little bit. But Dumb and Dumber, they totally redeemed themselves by taking Wyatt Milam with the next pick. I thought there were a lot of guards that went ahead of Wyatt Milam that left me kind of scratching my head. Milam screams to me this year's Dominique Pooney, someone that kicks inside from tackle and is an awesome player out the gate. I see someone that's going to be a good run blocker out the gate who could be a potentially great run blocker. He needs to get more accurate and miss less. He's got a powerful torso and he loves to lunge into guys in the run game, and he does miss and fall off blocks at a higher rate than you'd like to see, but when he does connect, he has awesome leg drive. He can absolutely displace you off the ball. I think he's a good enough athlete to block wide zone, and for a tackle that didn't allow a single sack in his final year at West Virginia and was someone that I think his foot speed and his range as a tackle is why you project him as a guard. But he was good enough as a tackle to be insanely productive out there as a pass protector, and I think his style as a pass protector will translate immediately to the inside. I actually see a ton of Brandon Sheriff in his game, who was a college tackle, moved inside, and started his career in Washington, was a really good player for Jacksonville for a long time. So I think this was an A-plus pick, getting a starting guard out the gate in the 3rd round, and someone that I think has like Pro Bowl potential. Was one of my favorite guard prospects in this draft for sure. So love that. getting Trevor Lawrence even more help with some pass pro and some added additions to the run game there, on top of getting Byshell Tootin in the 4th round. So, I think it's a good pick, 3rd, 4th round grade. That's exactly where he lands. Obviously, the 4.32 speed, they were going for some athletes here with Ransaw and Tootin, looking for some speed and some juice on this team. I'm not going to slam them for this. I think it is ultimately a good pick, and if he hits, he's going to be a difference-making running back. I did see a guy that had vision problems. He fumbled the ball a ton. He doesn't have a ton of power. I think we've seen backs with a ton of speed. You get to the NFL and everybody's fast, right? Like, he is going to be fast relative to a running back, but to pass, in my opinion, on Cam Scatabo, I just don't agree with going with that style. I think if you're Liam Cohen and you saw what happened with Bucky Irving last year and you're looking for your Bucky Irving here with the early 4th round pick where they got Bucky, look, Bucky doesn't win with speed. He wins with contact balance and shiftiness between the tackles and out in space, and good hands in the receiving game, unlike Byshell Tootin, who wasn't a productive receiving back at Virginia Tech. I understand the styles are very different between Tootin and Scatabo, and they're swinging for, maybe that speed threat. They want their version of Jahmyr Gibbs. I think that becomes dangerous when you see something with a unique player working for another team and you're passing on better football players to reach for that, and a guy that just ran a 4.32. I think in a vacuum, drafting him at the top of the 4th round is good, right? This is a good pick. I'm not here to slam it, but I did see a lot of better backs in this draft that were available for you at that point, especially Cam Scatabo, but even guys like Devin Neal, and I know he fell to the 7th round in Damian Martinez. Maybe there's something going on behind the scenes that we don't know there, but overall, I think this was a good, not great pick, and I am, hopeful to see if he can tap into that 4.3 speed at the NFL level, because if he can, that's going to be really exciting. Then they take Jack Kaiser with the 5th pick in the 4th round. It was just early for me. It feels like the Jags take a linebacker every year, and it's like, why? I understand this is a new regime coming in, but I don't see the need for this. You have Devin Lloyd, you have Foye Oluokun, you have Chad Muma, you have Ventrell Miller. Jack Kaiser is a high floor backup linebacker. I had him as a 5th to a 6th round guy. This is just early. There were difference-making players to be had, in my opinion. And you go with this guy. It's just, I'm not a fan of that pick, personally. Then they take another linebacker at the end of the 6th round. And Jalen McLeod here is fine as a 6th to a 7th round guy. Again, taking another linebacker here, I don't fully understand that. I also don't agree with the scheme fit here, because I had him circled as this year's kind of Belichickian linebacker, think in the mold of like Andrew Van Ginkels and Kyle Van Noy's. He played a lot of that at Auburn. He's 240 pounds, kind of played on the edge, rushed the passer a lot, dropped into coverage from the edge. I liked him in that role, but looking at him as a linebacker, it's kind of a projection to actually go through his read keys and do real linebacker stuff, dropping into coverage from those alignments. So if you already took Jack Kaiser, you already got a deep room. I would have preferred to see them go in a different direction. But I also wonder, in more of a base 4-2 defense coming in, how Jalen McLeod fits, like where he's going to play, if he is good. Like, I don't know. It just was kind of a weird pick for me. Throughout this series, so many of these day 3 picks make sense in terms of like scheme fit. I felt this was a situation where I would call out where it didn't really make sense to me, unless they plan on doing like a lot of 4-3 over stuff where he is more of an on-the-ball linebacker. We'll see there. That isn't something I necessarily saw from the Packers with Anthony Campanile coming over from Green Bay. I will say Campanile is an excellent linebacker coach, and on one hand, I like him kind of getting a couple guys that he likes. On the other hand, I'm like, that seems like you're catering to your linebacker coach that's your defensive coordinator now, when I'd rather just see him get to work with Ventrell Miller and Chad Muma and see what he can do with those guys. Anyway, it's not the end of the world. It's a pair of day 3 picks. It's not going to, crucify their grade or anything like that, but definitely a couple picks that left me scratching my head a little bit. Then they go Rayon Lane out of Navy. Saw him as, a day 3 special teamer that maybe can develop as a safety. So, solid pick. That was fine. They needed some pieces in that secondary for sure. Then they go Jonah Monheim, center out of USC, very likely a backup center. I didn't get to the tape, so maybe there was even more there if I had watched him. I just didn't quite get down the board far enough to get a write-up done on him, but he certainly was a draftable prospect and on my radar, so a solid enough pick there. And then, hey, I love LaKeen Allen at the ass end of the 7th round. I had him as an early day 3 guy. I think after TreVeyon Henderson, he was the best pass protecting back in this draft. And it wasn't just like, okay, cool, he's a pass protector. What does that really do for you in practicality? He has some size. He has some burst. He had really good vision, in my opinion. He's not the biggest guy by listing at 6'2", 204, but he looks much bigger than that personally, and he plays with much more strength and contact balance. Now, he's not going to power through a bunch of guys ultimately with that size, but I do think he can run between the tackles, and he runs great routes. He's a fluid athlete. A lot to like in his game, is just not this super high upside player, but I did have a higher impact grade in terms of just how good are they on day 1 than I did on Byshell Tootin, so I wouldn't be totally surprised if we get through this year and neither of these guys are really starting, because you still have ETN and you still have Bigsby, but I wouldn't be surprised that the longer and longer they get removed from, testing numbers and draft value and stuff, as both these guys are in that locker room, because I do think they both make the team as RB3 and 4, wouldn't be surprised if they reach a point where it's just, actually, LaKeen Allen is younger, more reliable, better vision, better overall player, and he actually is the one that emerges as the kind of third down back that they like out of this group. But that is going to round out our Jags analysis here. No undrafted free agents really popped for me there. There's a lot of ups and downs with this draft. I did settle on a B+ grade here, though, because ultimately you may have walked out of this draft with a starting corner and a starting wide receiver and a starting guard. Hopefully one of those 2 backs hits as well, and you get a running back answer for the long haul as well, and maybe they both hit, and you got a really nice duo there. I don't know if they maximized value, and they certainly put their balls on the table, giving up all those picks for quote-unquote one player in Travis Hunter, but they definitely stole some value as well, in my opinion, with those Milam and Allen picks on top of that. So a B+ grade for the Jacksonville Jaguars at the end of the day, and it is time for Liam Cohen and company to get to work down there. But we will finish up with the Houston Texans here. Just as a caveat as we get into this, the Texans were trading all over the place. They made like 4 or 5 draft day trades, and the NFL makes it very difficult to keep track of all of these trades. So we're just going to, other than that first big trade down there, we're just going to kind of talk about who they got, where they got them. I think everything kind of evened out, but I do think the trade down here as we get into this first selection here was nice, right? Because they didn't have their own 2nd round pick from the Stephon Diggs trade, and just to kind of move down after I do think the Vikings sniped the guy they wanted in Donovan Jackson. You move down, you readjust, you get a whole night to think about who's going to be the right pick for you for the most part, and then you pick up a pair of 3rd round picks on top of that. So I love that the Texans are just loading up on draft picks, right? After that Laramie Tunsil trade. I didn't love the Laramie Tunsil trade itself, getting rid of a franchise left tackle, but if you had to do it, they're going to be putting themselves in a spot to really kind of load up this roster with a bunch of talent and head into kind of the real CJ Stroud window here. So it's going to be something to monitor over this draft, where they did have a decent amount of picks, and next year where they're loaded up from the Commanders picks too. But they take Jaden Higgins with that number 2 pick, and really fun destination, especially when you see them take his teammate and Jalen Noel in the 3rd. Kind of my first reaction to this was like, wait, they already have Nico Collins at home. Why'd they take Jaden Higgins, who has a lot of similarities to Nico Collins? But at the end of the day, porque no los dos, right? Put them both out there as like double X wide receivers. And it's not like Nico's a true only X wide receiver where they only use him running up and down the sidelines like a T. Higgins, Mike Williams, Mike Evans role, right? Like they will put him in the slot. They will have him run a lot of in-breaking routes, crossing routes, that type of stuff. And I really think within the infrastructure of this offense, you can now just have both of these guys on both, either both on the outside or one of them goes in the slot, because I do think Jaden Higgins can make a lot of damage, do a lot of damage from the slot. So you just kind of have two of these guys now, and that's just going to be a complete pain in the ass for opposing defenses to handle. Definitely thought the value was good. Was proud to see Jaden Higgins go inside the top 35 picks, which is right about where I had him, right? I think he was 31st on my final big board. Yep, 31st. So he goes 34th. That lines right up. The fact that you trade down and still get a good player at a position of need, frankly, because I think this draft tells you how confident they are in Tank Dell getting back for them. And if Tank Dell's not going to get back for you, all of a sudden, CJ Stroud needs some more guys to throw to. I think we felt down the stretch, really, teams able to focus on Collins and them not have a whole lot of other answers. Obviously, Stephon Diggs doesn't get brought back here, and Tank's injury is clearly a concern. So I think prioritizing wide receiver was very smart for them. I love that pick. And especially once we get to talk about Jalen Noel there, if there were questions about a little bit redundancy with Higgins and Collins, Noel is a true slot weapon for them, kind of a little bit Tank Dell-y to his game. That just kind of brought the whole thing together. But we'll get to that in just a second. We got to talk about them taking their potential Laramie Tunsil replacement and Arianti Ursary here in the middle of the second round. Again, right around where I had him going. I think the value lined up really nicely there. He was the 44th player on my board, and they take him, 48th there. So spot on in terms of value, but I think in terms of fit, this is excellent. The Texans are bringing that Rams offensive system over. They've kind of stayed in this sort of Shanahan-Kubiak general philosophy here. So at the end of the day, you're always going to have some bare bones of a wide zone run game built in, and Ursary was an excellent wide zone run blocker at his size for Minnesota. But Ursary also brings some size to do some of the gap power stuff that we saw the Rams become a big, duo and gap heavy system over the last year or so. And if they want to do some of that, Ursary's going to be a good player for them as well, to kind of down block as a tackle, create some drive off the line of scrimmage, get north and south. I think from a run game perspective, Ursary's a really fun fit with what I envision them wanting to do, knowing what the Rams were all about. And then as a pass protector, he's got a lot of tools. Like, for a big guy, he gets a lot of depth in his kick sets, and he has the foot speed in there to really be a franchise tackle. He just needs to continue to speed up the processing and how quickly he's able to react with his feet, to cut off inside moves, to keep moving his feet as he's trying to protect the corner, that type of stuff. But you saw some of those reps against Abdul Carter against Penn State. Those were legit wins with real athleticism against, one of the most athletic edge rushers to come out ever. So there's a lot of potential in this player. It's just there are inconsistencies in his game. That's why he ultimately falls to the second round. But the last reason I really like this is they brought in all these Band-Aids at tackle, right? You got Cam Robinson, you got Trent Brown. Maybe he can stay healthy. They want to give Blake Fisher a second year. He was super young coming out. Year one did not look good, but they want to give him a year two coming out of Notre Dame there, second round pick last year, to just see if he can come along. They could use some legitimate help at guard, and I think Arianti Ursary could play guard for them. Titus Howard, I just think, has never been a natural fit at guard. Juice Scruggs, especially, I'm not a big Juice Scruggs guy, you guys. I think Ursary could be an upgrade for them at right guard right away, and then maybe eventually you do kick Ursary out to tackle, or if he's just awesome at guard, which I think he might be, you just keep him there as a second round pick and try to find a different franchise tackle option at another point. Really think this pick was a great value, gives them scheme flexibility, gives them positional flexibility, and was they knocked this one out of the park. And then with that bonus third round pick, I think they may have moved down here from the Giants pick or something. Again, it gets really complicated. I'm not going to try to dissect everything they did here, but they end up with the 15th pick in the third round, and they take Jalen Noel out of Iowa State. Another A-graded pick for me. I already hinted at it, but if you're going to take Jaden Higgins, you've got two bigger-bodied kind of sort of X-wide receivers, right? Again, they'll move these guys all over the place, but if you're worried about Tank Dell getting back healthy for you, Jalen Noel makes perfect sense. A more slender player, but a great route runner, a ton of juice, will thrive in the slot. There were some shades of like what Lad McConkey was last year, where he dots you up from the slot. He's got great hands, but can also track the deep ball and do some stuff vertically as well. This was a really nice pick. I didn't end up liking Noel quite as much as I like Lad McConkey, because I think Lad McConkey's route running was elite. I think Noel's was very good, if that makes sense, but obviously they got a little bit of a look at what Lad McConkey did to them in the playoffs, and they said, we could use a little bit of that skill set as someone that can kill you from the slot, but also someone who can scheme up double moves and slot fades from the slot and give you a little bit more of a vertical presence. He could be really dangerous. And how fun to reunite him with Jaden Higgins, right? This wide receiver trio is brilliant. And then realistically, maybe Tank Dell comes back, and maybe you do use Tank Dell as more of a specific formation player where he's not out there on early downs and being asked to run block, where he did get hurt doing that in his first year. And it sucks for Tank Dell, obviously, but I think you do have to be realistic about that situation at his size, if he can hold up in a full-time role. But hey, if you just use Tank Dell as like the best wide receiver in the league, and maybe with a couple of cheap wide receivers here on their rookie deals, you're able to bring Tank Dell back on a reasonable deal for what he is, and you just have an elite quadruple set of wide receivers. I don't know that the Texans could have done a whole lot better with their first 3 picks, and I think they filled their biggest needs here with these 3 picks. Then they take Jalen Smith out of USC. So I didn't get around to his tape. I was really frustrated when the Texans took him, because I had him estimated with a 6th to a 7th round grade. He was literally the number 1 guy on my watch list. I got up at like 6 in the morning, Saturday morning, before we did a 7-hour live stream, and started watching some of these day 3 guys that I didn't quite get to. And Jalen Smith was like the top of the list. So the first thing I did early Sunday morning was watch a little bit of Jalen Smith, just to get a glimpse of what he is and why the Texans saw him as a 3rd round guy. Or at least why they felt the need to take him in the 3rd round. And after I did a short, watch on him, obviously the hindsight helps there and leads to some, I would say biased, jaded analysis here as far as like being okay with this pick as a B graded pick. So take that for what it is. I'll be honest about that. I don't care. But what I did know going in is like I saw probably 5 or 6 teams like flying him around for private visits and stuff. Like it was very clear that the NFL is fascinated in Jalen Smith, and I think the main reason for that is this draft was possibly the worst slot cornerback draft in a long time. It feels like there's been a lot of years where it's like, yeah, you can find a good slot corner in the 5th, 6th, 7th round. For some reason this year, those guys were just missing. And Jalen Smith was one of those guys that he did play more outside at USC, at least in 2024. If you go back to 2023, he did start as their slot corner. So I would imagine that the Texans went back to that 2023 tape when he was in the slot. And, even if he's not the most sticky coverage player, this is your classic DeMeco Ryans defensive back, where he loves to hit, he's fast, he arrives with force, and embraces that part of the game in a way that so many guys did not. So we did see several slot corners come off the board at the end of the 3rd round. I think some of these teams, like the Niners, for example, took that philosophy of like, there's only a handful of guys we like in this draft. I think we got to just walk out of day 2 with the guy now and not risk, the couple good slot corners, or at least capable slot corners in this draft, not make it to you in the 4th, 5th round. So I actually, do understand this pick by the Texans, because they need a slot corner. You love what you got from Stingley and Lassiter on the outside, but like Jalen Petre's heading into the last year of his deal. He's been all over the place for them. Jimmy Ward can do it, but he's Jimmy Ward. He's up there in age. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson's a little bit of both slot corner and safety, but I really think DeMeco Ryans values having 2, 3, 4 guys in this mold of just that kind of, coverage, take it or leave it. But do you blitz? Do you tackle? Do you play hard? Do you play fast? And try to ball hawk as well on top of all that. Jalen Smith fits that mold for him, and I think that he wants 2, 3, 4 of these guys. So I understand the pick. I don't really have any issues with it. It just definitely was like higher than consensus, and a bit of a surprise when he came off the board there that early. But I do ultimately understand it, and also just wouldn't be surprised with this fit if he worked out. But you go to day 3, they take they did trade up for Woody Marks here. I do know that. Pass catching specialist, and they could use that, right? Joe Mixon carries a lot of the load here. He's a good receiving back, not a great receiving back. If you want a little bit more, I'm not going to say even more juice because Joe Mixon has a lot of juice, but like that easy acceleration that Woody Marks has and the pass catching ability. If you want to give Joe Mixon a breather, and you should want to give Joe Mixon a breather at this point, let someone come in and do some of the pass catching stuff on third downs. Woody Marks made a ton of sense. I didn't have an issue with him in the 4th round, trading up to get him. I think they did give up a future 3rd to go get him. So it's kind of a lot to give up for Woody Marks in my opinion, but I do see them needing him in this offense for what he is. So I went solid pick there. Then they do get Jalen Reed in the 6th round. Great value at him as a 4th round guy. Just another aggressive, hard-hitting DB for DeMeco Ryans to kind of get in and coach up. He's very much their type. He does not need to play right away, right? You can sit him behind Chauncey Gardner-Johnson and Jimmy Ward and those guys. He's an absolute risk taker. I would say the most aggressive safety in this draft, and it led to a lot of busted coverages and bad angles as a run defender. But when he arrives, he loves to hit. Sometimes he leaves his feet, though, and misses tackles. But definitely thought the traits on him with, 4.5 speed at 210 pounds. He has starting traits, and he's going to be a great special teamer for you while he develops. So I thought that was a great pick, and maybe, he's got the tools to maybe start as a 6th round pick someday. And then, Graham Mertz out of Florida. I mean, that one made me laugh. This reminded me of when the Packers took Sean Clifford out of Penn State. It's like, really? At some point, we have to throw out traits and realize when a guy just can't play football. So I'm just not a fan of lighting a 6th round pick on fire. But we can move on. With the 8th pick in the 7th round, they take Keontae Hamilton out of Rutgers. I didn't get to him, so default kind of solid pick there. But definitely fits their measurables. They kind of have a type of defensive tackle. If you look at their roster, it's a bunch of 6'3", 305-pound athletic guys to come out in an even front. Don't necessarily need you to 2-gap, but have the athleticism to shoot gaps and run stunts. That's their type, and they definitely circled his physical traits as what they look for at that position group. And then they take Luke Lackey at the very end of the draft. Sure, take a dart throw on an Iowa tight end. Now, I do think we're reaching the point where we need to stop as a draft community labeling every Iowa tight end as this year's sleeper tight end. He ran a double move at the Shrine Bowl that went viral, and he got a lot of buzz. I will say the tape was very underwhelming on Luke Lackey. I did ultimately think he was draftable. I think he had a balanced profile and can be a tight end 3 in the league and fill out a depth chart for you. And to get that as effectively Mr. Irrelevant here, I think that's good value. They do have some room for someone to come in and compete for a tight end 4 spot on this team. But yeah, I'm not going to say this is some steal and that he's going to be a starter in the league and this is the next George Kittle and all this stuff. I think he's more of an Iowa tight end where it felt, not really like this, high upside dart throw, more so like, yeah, he's a balanced backup in the league worth drafting. But they did have some undrafted pickups. I liked Daniel Jackson, really good wide receiver for the Gophers, kind of catches everything, savvy route runner, has that ability to kind of track the ball in through traffic, had some really clutch moments as well, toe-tapping sideline catches, toe-tapping catches in the back of the end zone with defenders draped all over him. Maybe this is the Gopher fan in me being a little bit biased towards him and emotional for some of the big moments he had. But I did think he was draftable. He just isn't very fast, but I do think he plays a little bit faster than what he ran at his pro day. I think he ran in the 4.62 or something like that. Yeah, 4.63. The GPS numbers show him getting up there at a 20 mile an hour, go balls and stuff like that, which is more consistent with 4 or 5 speed. So I think he's faster than what he ran, and definitely worth bringing in as an undrafted free agent here. If Dell is going to start the year on IR, I think he could make the team over Justin Watson and Braxton Berrios potentially. So definitely a good pickup there. And then another dart throw as a slot corner, Elijah Huzzie. Not necessarily as traitsy as someone like Jalen Smith or Jalen Reed as a defensive back in general, but smart player, played a lot of slot for North Carolina. I thought he would get drafted just considering there weren't many slot corners in this draft, and he ends up slipping through the cracks. Wouldn't stun me if he ends up the better of the slot corners between him and Jalen Smith. I'm not saying it will happen, but I thought he was a nice player and a nice pickup as an undrafted guy. And we see undrafted slot corners surprise all the time. So definitely a couple guys that stood out there. So love this Texans draft. I give this an A grade. Really, especially just those first 3 picks, knocked it out of the park. They did some good stuff on day 3, nothing too flashy. And that Jalen Smith pick basically was a day 3 pick, very end of the 3rd round. It might have even been the last pick of the 3rd round, frankly. But yeah, love what the Texans did. I think that defense was really primed and ready to go, frankly, off of what we saw at the end of last year. And now you add a piece to the O-line and some much-needed playmakers for C.J. Stroud, where that group was really hurting at the end of last year. The Texans are positioning themselves really well as long as they can sort through this offensive line where they have like 10 different pieces right now and try to find the best unit and just give Stroud better pass protection than he got last year, which, not going to be that hard to accomplish even with Laramie Tunsil gone here. Get better pass protection from the unit as a whole. So I like where Houston's headed after I was hard on them for that Laramie Tunsil trade. And that is going to do it. Definitely let me have it in the comments down below. Let me know your thoughts on my grades from this video. Ultimately, if I was critical of a player, I obviously hope I'm wrong. I'm just being honest about what I saw here heading into the draft. But as we head out, if you could, again, please take just a second to hit that like button. Make sure you subscribe so you can catch all of my draft grades videos. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you soon. Peace out.